Today's podcast is sponsored by, it's not sponsored by Kirk's. I wish it was sponsored by Kirk's. But for audio listeners, I'm holding a can of Kirk's Pasito. Is it a top five? Is it a top five soft drink? I think it is. I think it certainly is. Anyone who knows me knows I'm a big orange guy. Fanta, Sunkist, that's my top. And then underneath that, passion fruit drinks, Passiona, Pasito, Solo. Solo would be top three. And then you got like Coke, Pepsi Max. Yeah. No. This is the one. Kirk's. If you're watching this, anyone at Kirk's, they're not going to sponsor me. Welcome to episode. Is this a football podcast? Wow. Welcome to episode 12 of Footy and stuff. Today we're doing another redraft because I enjoyed last week's one. I said I was going to do it anyway. I could have not enjoyed it, and I was still doing it because that's the content you're getting until draft night. But welcome back. If you're a previous listener slash watcher, and if you're new here, welcome. All right, I've already waffled enough. You're here for football. Let's just get into football because there's a lot of news. Again, lots of news, and then we got the redraft. It's gonna be fun. Let's do it. Let's start with Melbourne stuff because Melbourning. Man, if I hadn't titled this 2015 AFL redraft, because I know that's what people are here for, the title of this podcast would be Melbourning. Because, geez, let's start with Joel Smith. That's the big news of the week that's gone. He's been handed a 4-year AFL ban, 4 years, for 5 violations of the AFL's anti-doping rules. I think we all saw a ban coming, eventually. And it's come for Joel Smith here. And there's obviously nothing that we can really argue about it. He's been provisionally suspended since October last year. So he's banned from competing in any WADA compliant competitions. We'll see him allowed to train in November of 2027, which is 3 years from now. And he'll be able to play again in early January of 2028, at which point he'll be about 32, about to turn 32 ahead of that season. So we'll see what happens when that is over. My guess would be he's not going to be at Melbourne at that point. But, you know, you get what you're given. Then at Melbourne last week, their CEO, Gary Pert, stepped down. I think given how tumultuous it's been, I'm not entirely surprised that some change is starting to hit the D's now at that level. Obviously, we saw Kate Roffey step down as well as president. But yeah, he's staying on in a consulting role, but he certainly won't be as involved as he has been since 2018 when he arrived. Um, Obviously, he was there through their flag and through their rise and all that, so he played a big part, but I think the transition now is more than necessary, as I said, given everything that's happened. A lot has been happening at the D's, and I wouldn't say it's been much fun for them to deal with, so I'm not surprised that they want as clean a slate as possible. He wants to step back. From that perspective, I think it all makes sense. Jack Martin joins Geelong on a 2-year deal. I think it's a great deal for them. Look, he hasn't been able to string it together, obviously, for Carlton, but when he's fit, I still think he's a very good player. And yeah, they're going to get a good player out of him. I don't think he plays straight away, for sure, because their forward line is very good. But again, work hard, stay fit. He's definitely someone who I could see playing 10 games for them next year, maybe a little bit more than that, and being a good contributor. So, yeah. Also on a 2-year deal, Tim Membry gets to Collingwood. We spoke about this last week when he got delisted. It was expected and now it's done. I think it's come at a very good time for Collingwood, this one as well. Obviously, they've got Brody Myercheck, they've got Dan McStay, but they've kind of been lacking in that department a little bit. They needed something to give it a little bit of an extra edge, and I think Tim Membry will be good at doing that for sure. He should play quite a few games next year. So we'll see how it goes. If it doesn't work out, obviously, then they're going to have to go back to the drawing board with that because he's 30, 31. But I think for the meantime, it's a very good deal. Luke Edwards from the Eagles has walked away from the AFL due to his ongoing concussion problems. Wants to focus on his recovery from those. Cited wanting to prepare himself for the next steps in his life. I think that's a perfectly reasonable thing to prioritize and a good decision for him to make in the end. So best of luck to him. Hawthorn have announced that they have picked up former rugby league player Matt Hill. I don't know a lot about him, but he's been a member of the Melbourne Storm Academy, the Brisbane Broncos development squad. He's 20 years old, so a good young bloke for them to develop. He played as a fullback when he played rugby, so he's built, but he's very quick. I'll be interested to see where he fits in and how he's utilised, but I don't expect him to play straight away either. So we'll see how that goes for them. This one got me excited. I was always a sucker when I was a kid for international rules, Australia versus Ireland, and it was reported last week that AFL officials have met with officials from Ireland, and we've been making moves to potentially get that going again. 2017 was the last time we saw it. Please bring it back. Please bring it back. We've got the Indigenous All Stars confirmed. I just love stuff like this where we can see players from every club on the field at the same time, and it's something different. It's fun. COVID seems to have really killed the momentum with international rules against Ireland, and I would love to see it back. Now, all we've got left to talk about is delistings, and then we can get into this redraft. So, all of these players will get picked back up, as far as I know, in the rookie draft. So none of these players are done with these clubs, but they've just been delisted with the aim to pick them back up in the rookie draft. So Brad Crouch at the Saints, Oleg Markov and Ash Johnson at the Pies, Harry Schoenberg and Chris Burgess at the Crows, Jack Gunston at the Hawks will drop down to the rookie list. Good move for them to make with an experienced player like that. Josh Fay, Lockie Keefe and Jacob Weir at the Giants, Toby Pink at the Roos, and Aaron Francis and Joel Hamling at the Swans. So all those players will get picked up again. They will be playing for those clubs in 2025, but they were delisted this week. All right, let's get into this redraft. 2015 is the year we're doing today. We did 2010 last week. If you haven't checked that out, go check that out. But I think without having them side by side, just from memory, I think this draft is like so stacked compared to that one. I think it's better than the 2010 draft for sure. Just so many good players here. From about 12, 13 up, it's very good. Very good. But we'll look, without spoiling it, we'll get into it. Honorable mentions first. So what I do when I draft these redrafts, I don't know if I mentioned this last week, is I go through the draft and I just list every player who I think is decent. And then I start filtering them out one by one. So what I've been left with here is a list of 9 players who I noted down who didn't end up making the top 25. And I'll read those out to you. So we got Tom Cole from the Eagles, a premiership player, a decent player, didn't make the 25. Ryan Burton, Braden Fiorini, Oleg Markov, Bailey Williams from the Dogs, Matt Kennedy, who came close but didn't end up making it, Jack Silvani, Hugh Greenwood, and Alex Keith. So they're the players who I guess were somewhat considered that didn't make it in the end. And with that, we can start at 25. So, number 25, pick 25 in the 2015 redraft is Jade Gresham. Jade Gresham had a couple of very good years for the Saints when he came in. A few years in there were borderline elite from Jade Gresham. At the Bombers now, I don't think in recent times he's ever really impressed me as much as any of the guys above him. For a variety of different reasons, whether it be from a consistency point of view, hasn't really been too consistent, or even the peaks of some of the players above him have just been a little bit better in the last 3-4 years. I just think he's had his moments and he's done enough to land here, and that's about as much as I can say for that. In terms of the redraft, he goes to the Blues. He was drafted at pick 18 by the Saints, but at pick 25 he goes to Carlton. He's been linked with us in the past, right before he moved to the Bombers. There are times where I think he certainly would have been better than just about anything we had. And I obviously would have had him at his peak, but right now he'd potentially be on the fringes of our 22, somewhere around there. But he's fantastic depth to have for sure. Even at the Bombers now, I think he's a good player to have around, definitely. Pick 24 in this draft is Tom Doedee. Tommy Doedee is such an intriguing one here. You could probably make a case for saying that Tom, probably to this point, has not necessarily been anywhere near as good as some of the names we've left out of this list, or had anywhere near as good a career as some of the names we've left out, or Jay Gresham below him. But He's been pretty battered with injury over the last couple of years with those two ACLs, and I think it's easy to forget because of that that purely on talent he could probably be so much higher here. Like I'm expecting him to be fantastic at the Lions when he finally gets back early next year and gets that proper run at it. I think he's going to be so good for them. And I think if I redid this in 5 years, he'd probably end up a lot higher. Um, if he can just get that run at it. I think he's such a good player, Top Dudo. In the redraft, he went at pick 17 in the actual draft to Adelaide. He gets redrafted at Hawthorn. They snapped up Ryan Burton at a very similar stage here. I think it was the pick they have a little bit higher that they took Burton. But I think they're pretty similar defenders. So they would have been utilized about the same way. I think if you talk about how he'd fit there now, geez, like as if they need any more help. They're going to be star-studded back there next year. And I think Tom Doedee would just about be the icing on the cake in that backline this year. Doedee, Sicily, Barras, Battle. Yeah, yeah, very good. They'd be very good. But yeah, 24 Tom Doedee. 23. This one's a fun one. Anthony McDonald tipping Woody. What an absolute cult hero. How many players in this redraft have a genuine song written about them? I'll spoil it for you. The answer is zero. Unless someone wants to write a Tom Doedee song. Maybe I'll write a Jacob Wiedering song and sing it when we get to him. But anyway, no, just such an amazing player to watch at his peak. Bloke was just spitting out highlights. Genuine walking highlight reel. Obviously, it wasn't sustained for an awfully long time, and you can't have him too high because of it. But God, like we're just never going to forget some of the things that Tipper was doing at his peak. Originally picked 22 in the rookie draft, so they got an absolute bargain for him at that point. Goes to North in the redraft, and I think he'd certainly have been just about as good for North as he was for the Bombers. It's probably a position that the Roos lacked in for a little bit there as well. So in those peak years, I think he would have been very good for them as well. Number 22, pick 22. Marby or Chol? Marby. I love Marby. He's nothing flash. Like, he's never going to be anything flash. He's never going to be the best key forward in the comp. But he does what he needs to do. Crash packs, throw his weight around, bring the ball to ground, let the Mosquito fleet get to work. That's his job now. Kicks a few himself as well. He does it. 37 goals this year for the Hawks. Career high of 44 at the Suns in 2022. Leading goal kicker in both those years. So he was their leading goal kicker this year. Let's remember that. In a year where the Hawthorn forward line was very cohesive, he was their number one goal kicker. Simple as that. Played for Richmond semi-frequently in those two flag years as well. Two of those flag years that he was there for. Didn't play in either grand final, but I guess that's something to account for, that he was a contributor at that time as well. Redraft. So he was taken a pick 30 in the rookie draft by Richmond. So another rookie draft steal, really. Ironically, he does go to Gold Coast in the redraft. We have seen what he's been able to offer there previously, but they did move him on. So, yeah, not too much to speak on there. Gold Coast's loss has so far been pretty beneficial for the Hawks, in my opinion. So, yeah, number 21, Jacob Hopper. Another player who had a very good peak in the middle there. 2019 to probably about 2021. He was certainly a big part of that Giants side and the good footy that they played. It's definitely dropped a bit in his move to the Tigers, or at least they're not necessarily getting what they thought they paid for and what they may have expected out of him. But he's still a good player, a good contributor, but they probably just want a little bit more as they head into this transition and this rebuild as well. I think it's the fine margins. I think he can go from good to great again, for sure. Obviously, he was taken at pick 7 in the initial draft, but he was an academy pick, so he goes back to the Giants. Makes my life easy, not much to say there. There's a few of those coming up. Pick 20, Blake Hardwick. Again, nothing flashy, much like Marby or Chol. Nothing flashy. They got a few of those players at Hawthorn, but he certainly gets the job done more often than not. A bit of question last year as to where his best position was. He was moved forward, had a couple of massive games, 5 goals, 4 goals. Goes back again and he's solid there as usual. I think the answer clearly now is he plays where they need him and he's just going to do a job. They have a fantastic back line going into next year, and there's no certainty that even if that's where he spends most of his time, that he's going to be one of those starting 6 players. But he's certainly a great player to have as an option wherever you need him. So yeah, went to the Hawks at pick 44 in the 2015 draft, retaken at 20 by the Hawks. This is where they actually picked Ryan Burton, as I said before. So makes it easy for me. No analysis necessary. He just goes back to the Hawks at a different stage. Pick 19, Kalachi. This was hard to rank. Prior to last season, he might have just about scraped the 25. If not, he would have been left out. Purely because he's never stood out. Like ever. He's just never really done anything spectacular. Like he's always been okay. But I've never noticed Kalachi as much as I've noticed him now. Um, because something I value a lot is the ability to stand up in big games of footy. And the way that he performed in that final series just now, and particularly the prelim and the grand final as well, you just have to appreciate those types of players and what they can do in big game scenarios. And he's now one of those players that teams have to watch now. There's obviously a little bit of recency bias here, putting him above some pretty decent players off the back of 4 good finals games. But I think there's also an element of future projection here because I think I'm expecting him to really turn a corner and hit that peak next year, and I think he's going to have more games like that in the home and away season. And I think the next few years are going to be very good from him, in my opinion. He went at pick 8 initially with the Gold Coast Suns. Goes to St Kilda in this redraft. I don't know how much they would have gotten out of him up until this point, but they'd certainly love him now. It's almost another type that they're lacking in their forward line. They have some decent talls, have some really good smalls, but I can't really think of anyone who fits into that middle section there. He's got some really solid presence in the air, clean at ground level. I think he'd be a really good fit at the Saints, if I'm honest. Moving on. Pick 18, Mason Redman. Very good player, in my opinion. Like 2022 and 2023 for him were very good. 2023 in particular was outstanding. This year he felt a little bit more, not so much sloppy, but I think his consistency sort of just fell away a little bit. But that's almost reflective of the entire team in Essendon, so you can't really blame that on him. But nonetheless, I think he'll bounce back. Very good player at his best, and they probably need that if they want to start bridging that gap now. Because it feels like every year we're saying, when are the Bombers going to make finals? Are the Bombers going to start to bridge that gap and play more consistent, good footy? He's going to be a big part of that. Because when he's consistent, it seems it rubs off on everyone a little bit. Originally picked 30 in the 2015 draft, he gets redrafted to Adelaide, which is very interesting, considering that nearly got done a year ago, 2 years ago. They offered him a big deal to get over there, and he knocked it back to stay at the Bombers. They probably are, the Crows, still lacking a little bit of rebound off that halfback flank, and it's something they could certainly be using right now. I think if he was still available, they'd go in for him again. But yeah, no, I think he'd be a good fit, to be honest. Pick 17. Eric Hipwood. Big Eric. I can never quite work out where I stand with Eric Hipwood. Like, he's certainly not as consistent as some of the comp's premier key forwards. We know this. But every now and then, he'll just drop a bag of 6 against the Dogs, a bag of 5 at Adelaide Oval against the Power. One of the greatest grand final goals from a big man I've ever seen. That all happened this year. And you look at that at face value and you think, geez, this guy's pretty good. It does make him a little hard to place, though, because then he has those drop-offs and he's not as impactful and he's not as... he doesn't contribute as much as a Joe Danaher does behind him. Yeah, there's a lot of talent above him. So I think him landing at 17 isn't necessarily on him as much as it is on the fact that just everyone above him is a little bit more consistent. But peak Eric Hipwood's very good. Like, if he strung together a full season of some of these performances he's having... Jeez. We know he's capable. That's the point. He was an academy pick. at the Brisbane Lions. Originally picked 14, drops 3 places, but he gets redrafted to Brisbane because of that. Pick 16, Ben Keys. Every team has their set of players that always play well against them, and Ben Keys is that for Carlton, for sure. He's in that list. I would hate to see his average stat line against the Blues since maybe 2021, 2020. It would actually look disgusting. Absolutely disgusting. But to be fair, it's not like he shuts off for the rest of the year. Like he's actually probably just had a career best year as a forward at least. Joint best and fairest this year alongside Jordan Dawson. Really solid, reliable player. And I think probably deserves this spot on this list. Was taken at pick 24 by Brisbane as an academy player, so he stays at the Lions, but I imagine it would have gone a similar way. He didn't really break in the way he wanted to at the Lions, but he's been fantastic for the Grows since then. And I think pick 16 is about right for him. Pick 15, Ben Mackay. Benny. Plenty of people would have him lower here. I understand why. The reasons for not giving him as much credit. Purely based on his form and consistency compared to some of the players that I've listed below him. But I'm pretty prepared to keep backing him in, to be honest. I thought he started the year really well for the Bombers. That's the first thing that I have to get out of the way. It was probably for, I couldn't tell you how many rounds, but a few rounds. He was probably their standout defender. It certainly tailed off. I'm not going to shy away from that fact. I think he's really going to kick into gear when he has more support around him, better support around him. It's not as bad as the backline he was playing in at the Roos, that's for sure. But there are definitely missing pieces and positions at the Bombers that aren't up to scratch. He needs better key defensive help, in my opinion, because he's so talented. And spreading the load, I think, will help him shine a little bit more. What I will say from a personal standpoint, like his individual game, he's a very good one-on-one defender, but ball in hand, good God. Like, does the guy get spooked? Jeez. That's something only he can work on. But I think, yeah, as a pure one-on-one key defender, I think he's very good. And he will get better as other players stand up around him. Originally taken at pick 21 by North Melbourne, he rises 6 spots. He's taken by Richmond in the redraft. Look, with this rebuild they're going through, he'd certainly be just about their best key defender. Him and Noah Bolter, if Bolter's playing back there. But he'd also probably struggle at times for the exact same reasons that I just spoke about. So, yeah, interesting one. But I think he'd be fine for the Tigers. Pick 14, Harry Himmelberg. Terrific player. Was mostly a forward early on. But he's pretty much a full-time defender now. I don't think he really played forward. At least the times that I watched the Giants last year, I don't think he played forward. Very good accumulator of the football. Great support for Sam Taylor and Jack Buckley. He's never going to have to take the best forward. And I think that helps them because it allows him to impact a little bit more, moving out of defensive 50, playing a bit loose, collecting the footy. I like the role that he plays at the Giants a lot. He was taken to pick 16 by the Giants as an academy product, rises 2 picks, but he's an academy player, so he stays at the Giants in this draft. Again, makes my life easier, as I said. Pick 13. Nathan Broad, a bit of an underappreciated player when it comes to speaking about his role and the footy that he played in those 3 flag years at Richmond. Played in all 3 grand finals. He came in as a mature ager at 22 years old, so he's a little bit older than the rest of this crop, but he's still very impactful, even today. I'm glad that he's chosen to stay a Tiger over moving to the Roos because I think his leadership and his experience around that club is going to continue to be so important for their young defenders and really their entire new crop of youngsters as well. He would certainly be playing that role at North as well, so either way, his leadership is going to be put to good use. But I'm glad that he's chosen to stay at the Tigers and be a one-club player, to be honest, because I love players like that. He was taken to pick 67 by the Tigers, so an absolute steal, but he was a mature ager, so he was never really going to go that high anyway. Redrafted to GWS in the redraft. They kind of peaked at a similar time to Richmond, like when he started to come into that side. So I can't really imagine his impact being much different in another really good football team at that point. You'd be playing alongside guys like Heath Shaw, Nick Haynes, Phil Davis, all in their peak. So I think they would have been a pretty good watch with Nathan Broad added in there as well, if I'm honest. It's a good one. Pick 12, Dan Rioli, another Tiger. Such a solid talent. Came to that side as they started to peak, much like Nathan Broad. Played in all three grand final wins. Very versatile player, but I think he's definitely found a home on that halfback flank. I think I'd expect him to play there for the Suns next year. But yeah, just such a consistently good player. Richmond's best and fairest this year as well, albeit in a down year, but I don't think that makes much of a difference. If anything, it just shows that he's capable of being a pretty fantastic leader and a reliable player as well when the players around him need that. Originally picked 15 in this draft. He jumps three spots and he's taken by the Blues. So thank you. I'll have him. He'd definitely give us some real edge coming out of that defensive 50 for sure. Something we've lacked a little bit at times, and perhaps over relied on Adam Sard to be able to do that by himself. Although I do think as Jordan Boyd develops, as Billy Wilson develops, we can get that out of those players for sure. But right now, I'd love to have Dan Rioli, please. Pick 11, Sam Collins, fantastic, underrated, beast. As far as key defenders go, I think I'd probably have him up there um, as one of the best in the comp. Just another very consistent player, someone who's hard to stop as well. Started at the Dockers, made his way to the Suns, two-time best and fairest. One of those came this year, and he beat some very good names to it this year, I think, as well. But yeah, he's just about peaked now, so he's going to be crucial if they want to crack into the eight next year. But if he can continue that form for a couple more years as he gets into his 30s, I think he's going to be so important. Originally, when I picked 55 for the Dockers, got to the Suns eventually from there. Goes to Adelaide in this redraft. I do like guys like Mark Keane and whatnot, but I think Sam Collins is far and away better than anything that the Crows have right now. I mean, you look back to their 2023 side and how close they were to getting into finals. They just fell short. I think players like that, like Sam Collins, could have been that extra edge they needed. Make him a little bit better defensively. They could use him for sure. Definitely. Would have been a good one. Pick 10, Dan Houston. Now at Collingwood. Has been at Port Adelaide. Top tier. Top tier. I think I struggled moving him any higher here because of the talent above him. The peaks that some of them have had. The longer stretches that some of them have had. I think the last 2-3 years, though, have been fantastic for Dan Houston. Two-time All-Australian in 2 consecutive years, this year and last year. Should certainly carry that form over to the Pies, and it'll give them a big boost for sure. Originally picked 45 in the rookie draft, so a success for Port Adelaide there. Goes to Carlton in the redraft. Jeez, we've snapped up Rioli and Houston in the space of 3 picks. I mean, like everything I just mentioned with Rioli, for all those reasons, he'd obviously be very good at the Blues. There's a reason that we were so heavily linked with him over the last couple of months. But yeah, Dan Houston, number 10. Pick 9, Darcy Parish. Now, before you scoff at him being here, because I just know that these people exist and there are going to be people who have a problem with him being in the top 10 of this draft. It's very stacked. Let's just remember that Darcy Parish at his best was just about unplayable. Like those 3 years there, I don't remember which 3 years they were exactly 21, 22, 23, 20, 21, 22, something like that. He was phenomenal in those 3 years. Like it's been a while since he's displayed that, sure. But I'd bank on him rediscovering plenty of that form when he gets a decent run at it again. Some consistency under the belt. And I also think the belief that he lacks a bit of impact going forward is a myth as well. Compared to the league's top 10 midfielders, sure. But he was averaging like 7 score involvements a game at his peak. There are midfielders averaging less than that and getting forward less than that play for your teams that you would defend for your lives. So I'm not having anything about Darcy Parish not being impactful because I think at his best he's quite impactful. So yeah, only good enough for pick 9 because I think the 8 players above him are just unreal. Like they're all very good players. Originally picked 5 in this draft, goes to Melbourne in the redraft. I think I like a midfield group of Parish, Oliver, Petrarca, Viney. Like he'd have been there through that premiership year and that peak, and I think he'd give him something for sure. He's a pretty different midfielder to any of those 3. And I think it's a nice mix. So yeah, I think he'd be a good player at Melbourne, to be honest. In his peak for sure. Pick 8. Another player similar to Parish that I think people are starting to lose sight of how good he was at his peak. Callum Mills. Um, I think the thing that gets him above Parish here is the versatility. Started as a backman, still pretty proficient down there, mainly a midfielder now. But in 2021 and 2022, he was unreal in the middle, like so good. And people are starting to forget that now because he's been injured a bit, been in and out of there. But yeah, been their captain or co-captain since 2022. This year was his first as standalone, I believe. One-time All-Australian, one-time best and fairest, rising star from this class as well. I think I picked Heppel at 8 last week. So all the rising stars seem to be landing at 8. But yeah, no, I think if he gets a run at it, he'll be fantastic next year. He was shaky when he got back this year, midway through, but he started playing really well until he got re-injured in that qualifying final. So yeah, hopefully he has a full year next year, and I think if he does, he'll be really good. He was originally taken at pick 3 by the Swans, an academy product, so he stays at the Swans. But yeah, has dropped a bit, but still a very good player. Pick 7, one of his teammates, Tom Papley. As far as small forwards go, Paps is certainly the best this draft has to offer by quite a margin. But he's been pretty consistently one of the better smalls in the comp. 293 goals in 184 games, so always good for one at least, but certainly has the ability to impact further, really pile it on when they need it. We've seen that so many times from him before. He's always ready to drop a bag of 4 on our heads after a stretch of 1 goal outings, 2 goal outings. But yeah, 3-time leading goal getter at the Swans, 1-time All Australian. I wish he was at Carlton right now. It still eats me up ever so slightly. But in this redraft, he goes to the Gold Coast Suns. He was taken to pick 14 in the rookie draft in 2015. Goes to the Suns. I think they'd love him so much. Off the top of my head, I haven't really researched this. I don't think they've ever really had that proper impactful small forward. And he is that. So, geez, they'd love to have him, especially going into this new era now where they're starting to fill out that team. It's starting to come together really nicely. I think he'd just about be their best forward right now. Yeah, something like that. Anyway, pick 6, Josh Dunkley. It's very funny that this one comes straight after we've spoken about Papley and Mills because the Swans famously passed on him as a father-son. But such a good midfielder, Josh Dunkley. 2-time premiership player at 2 different clubs. Famously beat the Swans in both those games. Just the one best and fairest at the Dogs. But he's been pretty consistently elite for maybe 5 or 6 years now. Just a really good, really reliable defensive midfielder. Purely from a Carlton perspective, because that's what I know best, obviously. I don't think there's a player over the last few years who not that I've necessarily been scared of, but has frustrated me as an opposition fan as much as Dunks. For the specific reason that it feels like every time we play the Brisbane Lions, he knows how to shut down Patrick Cripps, and it's so annoying because we've relied on him so much in the past. They're also probably the side we've struggled against the most over the last 3 or 4 years, so there's a little bit of trauma there. But nonetheless, taking a pick 25 by the Western Bulldogs, was passed on by the Swans, as I said, goes to the Giants in this redraft. And boy, that midfield would be even more stacked with him. Dunkley, Green, Kelly, Cornelio, Callahan. I don't know if they're necessarily lacking anything in that midfield that Dunkley would necessarily bring in, but it'd be nice for them, for sure. They'd be unstoppable. Pick 5 just pips Josh Dunkley. I did have Dunks here for quite some time, and despite the 2 flags, I think this player is just a little bit better. So I've opted to go with Jordan Dawson in at pick 5. His rise was quite a slow burn. Wasn't taken very high in the draft, so didn't really break into the Sydney team permanently until maybe like 2019, something like that. So spent quite some time as a pure prospect. But he came in, was very good in those last 2 years for the Swans, got the move to the Crows, and since then he's been nothing short of fantastic. Captain for the last 2 seasons, 2 best and fairest at the Crows, 1 All-Australian Blazer, 2 showdown medals. Very versatile as well. He's a midfielder, but he was predominantly a halfback and wingman at Sydney. Has played halfback, came in as a halfback at the Crows, and he's played forward for them as well. So he's just that perfect leader that you can drop anywhere, and you know he's going to do a job, and you know he's going to do it well as well. Originally taken a pick 56 by the Swans. He's taken by Essendon. in this redraft. Given some of the areas where they're potentially lacking a little bit of that experience and some consistency, he'd obviously be a terrific fit at the Bombers because he could play anywhere, genuinely. But I do wonder, had he been at the Bombers since the start of his career, I'm trying to sound not too harsh here, how different would his development have been coming up in that system? Because he barely played for the first 3 or so years at the Swans, and that's probably down to them being a very hard team to break into. He came in sort of as they took that dip into the bottom four. Um, so a very different system for him to come up in. And I wonder, would he have played a lot earlier at the Bombers? How would that development have been? Maybe I'm overthinking it completely because this is all hypothetical, but it's food for thought. You never know. And we will never know. But let me know your thoughts, Bombers fans. Pick 4. Harry Mackay. First Blues player to pop up in this redraft, and if you're paying attention, he won't be the last. Oh, Harry. Huge blip in the middle there. Let's get that out the way first. Massive blip to throw us into a spin. 2023 was not his year. But prior to that, he had a Coleman medal, an Australian Blazer in 2021. A very solid year supporting Charlie Curnow in 2022. And 2024 seen him get it all right back on track. Like, arguably a career best year, even with the Coleman having come before it. Just such a phenomenal player. Structurally. I have to stress that word because I think he'd be a shout for one of the most important players in the competition for the work he does in the position he's in. And perhaps it should be more talked about than it is. Like, he's just unbelievable. Impacting up the ground, helping in transition, crashing packs, kicking goals. Good from set shot this year as well, which is just music to my ears. He's back, for sure. 49 goals last season, and I'm sure he'll look to build on that even more. What more can I say? Like, I've said everything. He's just unreal. So good. And he's only number 4 in this draft, after all I just said. Originally taken at pick 10 by Carlton, he goes to Essendon in this redraft, and boy, would they be crying out for it. I don't like it, but it's a fit. Like, imagine they had Harry Mackay all this time. Pretty much for as long as they were in for him as well. But pretty much as long as he's been in the league, they've been crying out for that type of player that can get up the ground, take marks, transition, kick goals. It seems that Nate Caddy is the one who's starting to do those things. But man, like they've had some good key forwards, decent-ish key forwards. Peter Wright was very good at a stage. Cole Langford's been good. But Harry's just so much better than anything they've had in the last 10 years. So he didn't go that much later either. So it's definitely a choice that they had to make at that point in the draft. They had pick 5 and 6 when it was all said and done. So he wasn't that far off. But yeah, look, is what it is. Very good player, and I think he's the 4th best in this draft. Pick 3. Now, this top 3 is very good. I've gone with Clayton Oliver in a pick 3. Clary was tough to judge here because I don't necessarily think I'm blaming anyone who puts him number 1 here for the work he's done previously. He's such a decorated player. But I think I valued the dominance and the sustained dominance of the 2 players above him here and their importance positionally, the talent that they possess, and also the drop-off that Clary's had in the last year and a half. All of that kind of sealed his fate when it comes to this top 3. Nonetheless, I couldn't drop him any further because he's a brilliant player at his peak. Such a fantastic resume. Premiership player, 3-time All-Australian, 2-time AFL-CEA Champion Player of the Year, 4-time D's BNF. Terrific, terrific player. There's no academy pick here with Callum Mills, so he jumps 1 pick, but he's still taken by the Demons as well. So redrafted to the Demons after initially being pick 4. Fantastic player. But I think the 2 players above him are just a little bit better. Pick 2, I've gone with Charlie Curnow. I've never seen a player who performs the way that Charlie does and attracts so much attention and so many excuses, which I love. I love it so much from opposition fans for the method in which he plays and how he goes about things. He's genuinely just so hard to stop at times. And he's been that way for the last 3 years. His physicality makes it hard for him to match up on. He draws free kicks because of it. Defenders are forced to hang off him 2-on-1s every week, just about. Can still, despite all of that, bag 60 goals a season. He's just unreal. Like, he's so good. 2-time All-Australian, should arguably be 3, but we won't rant about that. 2-time Coleman medalist, 4-time leading goal kicker at Carlton, Ended his year with an injury, but I expect him to come back firing in 2025. Um, is he the early pick for the Coleman? Jesse Hogan's very good. So it'll be close. But I think those two, Jeremy Cameron will be up there as always. But Charlie's just so good, man. Originally taken at pick 12 in the 2015 draft, he's redrafted by Brisbane at pick 2, as if they need any extra help up there. Jeez. Imagine Charlie in there now. Actually, to be fair, Joe Danaher's gone. So he'd actually be the perfect fit there, to be fair. But imagine the last 3 years with those two playing together. Charlie sitting deep, Joe Danaher up the ground, Charlie Cameron hanging off. Oh my god. Yeah, no, I'd rather not think about that, to be honest. But there is one player who I think is a little bit better than Charlie. And it was actually such an easy choice. I never wavered from this. I put him number 1 and he stayed there. I've spoken about Jacob Wiedering enough previously on this podcast for people to know how good I think this guy is. He's just so, so, so good. 2-time best and fairest winner at the Blues. He's our current vice captain, and I'd imagine when Patrick transitions out of the captaincy, he will get that. He has made 5 consecutive appearances in the All Australian squad. 5. Only one other player has ever done that. Ever. And it's Marcus Bontempelli. And that gives you an idea of the level. But finally got that first blazer this year. Him being there for once will never ever stop me. I am not done talking about how many more Jacob Wiedering should have just because he has this one now. Because 1 from 5, given the way he's played over the last 5 years, is a bit of a joke. He should probably have at least 3. At least. But nonetheless, just such an unbelievable, reliable key defender. So reliable. So good. I could speak about Jacob Wiedering all day. Wow. In terms of the redraft, he's taken a pick 1 in 2015. So we got it right. Goes to Carlton in the redraft. Pick 1 is pick 1. He's the best player in this draft. I know a lot of people are going to disagree, so feel free to sound off. So that is it for the 2015 draft. We'll go back through to recap. Pick 25, Jade Gresham. Duday at 24, Tipping Woody at 23, Chol at 22, Hopper at 21, Hardwick at 20, Archie at 19, Redmond at 18, Hitwood at 17, Keys at 16, Ben Mackay at 15, Himmelberg at 14, Broad at 13, Rioli at 12, Collins at 11, going into the top 10, Houston at 10, Parrish at 9, Mills at 8, Papley at 7, Dunkley at 6, Dawson at 5, Mackay of Harry fame at 4. Mackay of Harry fame, that's a nice one. Not just Harry Mackay. Clayton Oliver at 3, Charlie Curnow at 2, and the best player in this draft is Jacob Wiedering. Fight me. Very good. Next week we're doing 2020. Not as stacked because it's a newer draft, obviously, but still quite a few good players in it. To give you a bit of a sneak peek, some of the players that are in here. I think maybe we just list off some of these good players and we'll weave in some players that I haven't yet ranked. So we've got Jamara Ugle-Hagan. We've got Max Holmes. We've got Errol Goulden. Bo McCreary is in there. Jack Ginnivan is there. Ollie Henry is there. Josh Tracy is there. Logan McDonald is there. Braden Campbell. Elijah Hollins. Some very good players. Riley Thilthorpe. It's a nicer ranking, and there'll be a little bit more potential coming into play when it comes to talking about the 2020 draft. But I think it's another good one. I think it is. But yeah, as I said, that is it for this week's episode. We'll be back next week with another redraft. It'll be the last one before the actual draft and the review of that. So stay tuned for that because that'll be fun. But yeah, please like, subscribe, comment your suggestions as always. If you're on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, follow, rating on there. They always help. All the social links are in the description, so follow all of those if you haven't already. And that is it. Thank you for watching and listening, and I'll see you next week.